Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and educator Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue features a melting pot of topics ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. It is the week of March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, Season 4, Episode 6. It is also the 5th Sunday of Lent. And Anne, I feel like I just came off of my longest week of the year. Not a bad way, just a long way that I will talk about during the flame. But how are you? Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Likewise, I love the shamrock sweater you're wearing. I wore green to Mass this morning, was happy to see a lot of green out there. But speaking of green, I just came off of watching it's kind of like known as the 5th major in golf, TPC, the Players Championship. It's at TPC Sawgrass in Florida. The ending was so dramatic.
Okay.
So we already know this, but the little things make a difference. So Wyndham Clark was putting to tie to be in a playoff against Scotty Scheffler. He nails the putt. Haley, it went in and it came out.
Stop.
So he did not get, he made par, but he needed a birdie to get into the playoff. Okay. So then, Scotty is such a classy guy too, but he's celebrating, not like he's not on the green. He's over the practice area staying warm. But, it's a weird reality. So exciting tournament. And we know the little things make a difference in sports, in life, etc. So that's what decided the championship. It's not the only small thing that makes a difference.
Well, and kudos to golf for trying to one up the March Madness, which is always exciting for everyone. And as we are recording, the brackets are being released. So, trying to keep everybody maybe watching golf as opposed to changing over to ESPN to see the brackets released.
Yeah. On Friday, I was at a lunch, and I go every year for St. Patrick's Day for the Hibernia Newman lunch. And Hibernia is Latin for Ireland, and Newman clubs are, I guess I'd say it's like the organization at a public university that brings the Catholic faith to students. Yes. So they have, basically like a parish or mass. So all the money from this lunch goes to specifically San Francisco State. They honor an Irish American in the community that's done a lot of great work. And it's a really special day. They have song, they have like a whole honor table, the mayor, the chief of police, the chief of fire, everybody. It feels like San Francisco is a very small town. But everybody usually goes to Johnny Foley's, this bar, afterwards. And in the past, it's been so packed, you can't get in. And there's, 500 people at this lunch. But because of March Madness, usually people are there watching the games. Well, this year, somehow it's later. The lunch was moved to the 15th. It's not on the 17th. So it was actually kind of, it wasn't as exciting because you're not having the games on, which is fun to watch. But it was also nice to be able to move around.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Well,
fans take their pocketbooks to the bars. Yes.
Always.
Experience, right?
Yes. Well, last week I headlined that 2-day Lenten retreat that I had talked about in our last podcast. And it was, I loved it. I've also had the opportunity to share my story secularly over the past couple of weeks. And I really do love the faith aspect of my story. So to have 2 days to really draw that out with an audience, with a group that was really receptive for it and attending so that they could hear that part of it, I really loved it. I think I need to figure out a way to do some sort of a Lenten retreat every Lent because I think I got as much out of it as hopefully those I was sharing it with. But I think I was trying to figure out why this week was so long. And I think all day Sunday, then working all day Monday, returning to the retreat Monday night, there till almost 10 o'clock. I get to Tuesday and I feel like I've already worked 48 hours that week. And I had a meeting in the afternoon and I was walking the couple out and I said to them as they're walking out the door, thanks so much for coming in. Happy Friday. Have a great weekend. But I didn't even realize it at the time. It wasn't until I got back to my office and sat down at my desk that I thought, Oh my gosh, I just wish them a
Yeah.
happy weekend, and it's only Tuesday.
Yeah. Wow. That is a long week
It was a
then. You
long
have,
week, and I
yeah.
kept oh
Hadn't even
it
gone through hump day.
and it was
Yeah.
right, and it wasn't, and it was again, it was a good week. It was a certainly a meaningful week in terms of starting off with that retreat, but and a busy week clearly. But it was really funny that I had
You said
no clue
that.
what day it
Yeah.
was. Right, I wasn't even like a Thursday. I was off by 4 days.
Yes. Well, that's great. I'm sure it was a real gift for those who are in attendance. I'm curious, just what's the format then? So you says 2 days, like, yeah, how did they shape it? Because a lot of parishes do a half day
Hmm.
retreat
Hmm.
or maybe a full day. So I'd love to hear, or maybe for ideas for others.
So it's almost like two half days in that sense.
Okay.
They start up with mass on Sunday. They then go into kind of small group activities or meetings, or some sort of that I'm not a part of, and then they do a potluck dinner. And then the speaker is invited in for the evening. So I was there from probably about 6:15 till almost 9 o'clock,
Okay.
and on both days.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the format for both days. And then they also have a piece on Tuesday, the third day, that again, I wasn't part of, so I'm not quite sure
Oh,
what that
wow.
takes place. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if that's a kind of a wrap up or a discussion about this speaker. But for me, I might have shared this before. I was asked to speak 2 nights, and I really thought it was 2 nights, maybe two different groups telling my same story, same the story at the same time. And an hour and a half, 2 hours is a long time to speak on one night. But telling my story collectively over 2 nights, looking at 4 hours almost, was a significant amount of time that I'm not
Yeah.
used to. So I had to reshape everything.
Yeah,
And,
I bet.
but again, I was able to dive deeper into a lot
Mm.
of the more meaningful parts of my story, which I really loved. I also shared videos. I know I
I
showed
was
that,
going to
I
ask
shared
about
that
that.
before. They were
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
They're
Oh,
hard for
that's
me to
awesome.
watch. It not
Yeah.
not because of the content at all. I think just probably very vainly and superficially, just watching and listening to myself speak. I think all of us have a hard time hearing ourselves speak, but also listening to me speak as an 18-year-old, or holding a press conference as an 18-year-old, and not
Yeah.
necessarily having the wisdom of being older and having done it a lot.
Yeah.
It's a little cringeworthy, but it's okay because it is authentic, and it's who I was.
Yeah. That's true. That's awesome. Well, congrats. And I love how that story, getting organized, like eliminating all the
Mm-hmm.
VHS tapes, clearing
Mm-hmm.
the clutter, made the space for a new resource in your talk that really allowed you to go deeper. So that's wonderful.
Yes.
I think it's, yeah, 3 day retreat. Blessings to those people. Blessings to the people who lead retreats all the time. And we have it at our school, parishes have. Those folks are it is takes a lot to go deep to give that to create the space so that people can go there.
It does, but it's very, I took it very seriously that this was what someone was
Mm.
choosing to spend their time.
Yeah.
So it's also a
Yeah.
huge responsibility too, I felt.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
did really enjoy it.
That's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done. Yes. So until your next one, we'll see where next Lent 2025 takes you.
We'll see, because now I have the presentation, so I'm ready to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
I
That's great.
also, on a completely different note, you would think being so busy this week, I would not have spare time. But boy, did I go down the rabbit hole. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with this. I can send you some resources, but I got sucked into a podcast and a Instagram feed called Where is Kate Middleton? And it is really fascinating. We could probably spend a whole podcast on this, but
Yeah. Easily.
boy,
Yep.
having read the book
Yeah.
Spare, I don't know if you've read Prince Harry's book Spare.
No, I haven't. I
So
want to do the audiobook of
so
it.
I
Yeah.
did listen to the
He reads it,
audiobook. He
right?
does read it, and he reads it in a way where he is just telling you a story. It's really wonderful. It doesn't feel like you're listening to a book. But and I wasn't quite, I'm not quite sure. Of course, we all feel the sympathy for William and Harry having lost their mother so young. That was a very public tragedy that they had to live,
No
again,
doubt.
in a really public way. So we all have sympathy for them, I believe.
No
I
doubt.
certainly do.
Yep.
But I'm not really sure how I feel about Harry and Meghan and the break and just kind of all of it. So I
Yep.
wasn't reading this book to feel more sympathetic or to not be sympathetic, but I would highly recommend the book. It is a fascinating glimpse into the royal family. Even if only half of it's true, even if some of it's embellished, there are parts
Sure.
of it that can't not be true. But it's
Yeah.
interesting to remember, the news story that we heard and then read about everything that was going on behind the scenes and, the game of chess that were being played. And it
Yeah.
really is fascinating and a little disturbing, quite honestly. And so
Mm.
now you have this other really interesting, event going on. I don't even know if it's an event, but this experience where no one's seen her and no one's heard
Yep.
anything. And all I keep thinking about are all these other stories that I read in this book, Spare, and knowing
Mm.
that there must be so much going on behind the
Interesting.
scenes, trying to manipulate the media or what's put out
Yes.
it's fascinating. It really
Yeah.
is. And I don't know
That's-
why we're fascinated by it, but
Yeah.
we
Good
are. I
question.
am.
Yeah. Yeah. So yesterday I had opening day for the Women's Golf Network at my golf club, and afterwards we ate, had a meal, and a friend shared exactly what you just said. The rabbit hole, TikTok, 14 videos, 16 videos, just yeah, the theories, throwing them out to the table, seeing which ones people feel is true, which ones might not be true. So I do appreciate the question, why is it that we are fascinated?
Right.
Everything in our world is so public. And so when we don't get the answers, now, obviously, some people know the answer to this question.
Right.
Her medical doctors, her spouse, her
Her.
children, whoever needs to know.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And
So
I do understand and respect and fully believe that they should have privacy if they're
yeah,
going through a
yeah,
traumatic event or an illness, whatever it is. But on the
yeah.
flip side, I can't get over this fascination. And I'm also not a rabbit hole person, or at least I don't think I am.
Interesting.
I'm
Yeah,
not a TikToker.
yeah,
But boy, this really,
yeah.
but
Catches you.
clearly I
Yeah,
am, because, or at least I am when it comes to this topic. So not really proud of that, but I spent about an hour
yeah.
with my coffee
Okay. All right. Well,
yesterday.
that's tame. That's tame. I think the author of Spare, the ghostwriter is the same ghostwriter for Andre Agassi's book, which is,
Love
I think
it.
it's the best sports autobiography I've read. It's open, and I'm on a committee. We had a social gathering, and one of the women there is from Germany, and she's a tennis player. So I said, "Oh, are you a fan of Steffi Graf?" I mean, Stephanie, because that's what she goes by now. And she's like, "Oh," and I read Andre. She's married to Andre
Hmm.
Agassi. And I read the book. It was just riveting. It was the best, ever. And I said, I have to ask you, how old are you? Did you grow up with Steffi? And she's like, well, I'm 38. And I was like, oh, okay, okay. So you like, and yet that speaks to the power of, I think, the book,
Yes.
because I was like dialed in. I was playing tennis. I was of the age to remember all that. She's like 5, 6, 7, 8, probably growing up hearing it. So, um, it'll be interesting because Harry is young. How old is Harry?
Probably
I mean, we've known.
late 30s.
Okay, yeah, and so yeah, I don't need him to be my peer. We've obviously lived through all those events, like you said, the death of his mother, and yeah, I mean, he's been alive our entire lives,
Right.
so it'll
Right.
be interesting to. Are you saying that reading that book only adds to the conspiracy? Like, are you leaning into these like, I guess I'm curious about like,
I would say that having read the book, it it makes it lends to support the conspiracy in the sense that it actually could happen. Because
okay,
there are conspiracy theories out there, obviously, that are crazy. And then
yeah,
there's some that
yep,
you think, oh my gosh, would they really go to those lengths to do that?
right,
But yes, actually, I think they would, having read this book.
okay, okay,
And just to
so
circle back, also for our
yeah,
readers, the Andre Agassi book, I would agree, is one of the best sports biographies out there, and or autobiographies, I guess. But it is, I was later to read it. I did not read it when it came out. I probably read it 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm not even really a tennis person, but
Yeah. You still loved it.
it's really,
Yeah.
really good. And I think for anyone who is interested in sports or who grew up
Yeah.
watching them or it
Right.
participates in any sport, it doesn't even have to be
Mm.
tennis. The idea
Yeah.
of what goes on behind the scenes where you just see this life and you think, there's probably so many people who aspire to be him, and you realize how hard that was, and in many ways how broken he was, as we all are, and yet the greatness that he was able to achieve in spite of that. So fascinating book, highly recommended as
Yeah.
well.
Okay. Okay, listeners, you have two books to check out potentially there. Yes. I think I haven't read Spare, so I can't speak to it, but I think in many ways it is a story of redemption. That's part of,
Mm-hmm.
right, why he wrote it. He had to make sense of this part of his life that he hated, but has a difficult relationship with. And you see his head is shaved, and he's his authentic, true self. So
Right.
in that way, he offers something. And I can't speak to Spare. I don't know if that's part of his process or journey, or if this is who he says he's an authentic person because of sharing the story. I'd be curious to maybe take that lens with it as I listen.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed.
we'll
Okay,
see.
Lent, giving up meat on Fridays.
Yeah. Okay. So this was um interesting to me because, well, college decisions came out on Friday, as people know. I don't know about your school. Our school also gave decisions, and I was looking at my thread of text messages, Haley, and so many of them were from people from Notre Dame. And I was just thinking about the relationships in my life. Like, so many people that I'm in touch with are connected through Notre Dame. And one of them is actually a very close friend from high school, and we happened to go to Notre Dame together. Now that's not standard for my where I grew up. I realized, you're right, there were certain schools,
Mm-hmm.
we could probably name them, that where a lot of kids would go. Anyways, she reaches out. She's like, "Hey, Ann, her husband went to Notre Dame as well. We were asking, did Notre Dame not serve meat on Fridays during Lent?" And I was happy to weigh in because I used this example in class. My roommate, who was very bright, and she is somebody I would say in general was always asking questions or kind of pushing, just kind of limits. And I mean it in like I respect that. She said, "Why is this isn't even a sacrifice if we can't give it up?" And so we kind of thought about why the university would do that because of this institutional commitment. We are a Catholic university. This is who we are. This is what we do. Sometimes that doesn't sit well with people, but that's how Notre Dame handled it. I wasn't sure if that was something that they still do. I could see, the student body is still largely Catholic, but it's made a real effort to be more diverse, not only ethnically, but even there's some religious diversity that I
Mm-hmm.
think that they speak a little bit to. I mean, it's truly a Catholic university. That's what it is. It's not going to say it's not. And I found out from a friend of mine, and I don't know what James, your son, said, but my friend, a Holy Cross priest, said yes, still no meat on Lent on
Great.
Friday, no meat on Fridays during Lent.
Correct. Yep. James
So I thought,
confirmed
okay,
that.
interesting. Um, and it just made me so. My friend, she said, "Well, that's an interesting point about sacrifice." And I said, "I don't really know if it's about sacrifice as much as it is about a ritual practice that we do. Now, sure, it is a sacrifice. For some people, it's not. I mean, let's be
Right.
honest. In
Right.
the day we live in now, a lot of people don't eat meat, and we know historically why meat was not offered. But I think it's just part of we have to be able, we don't have to. I think it's important to be able to point to ways that show, even on the most surface level, they speak to our Catholic identity. Like, this is who we are because we're Catholic. And I'll go outside for a minute. Like, the football team doesn't put names on the back of their jersey. Personally, I don't like it. I'm over it. I'm like, I'm old. I can't remember everything. But they do it as a sign to say, hey, this is where team is first. It's about the school, it's not about the individual. So, in that way, I respect it. But it's like, okay, because we are Catholic, these are some things that we do.
Yeah.
So, in that spirit, like, yeah, we go to mass on Sundays. We have holy days of obligation. We do acts of service. Like, I am saying this as someone who works in a Catholic school where I think I would enjoy a conversation with my peers to say, okay, because we're Catholic, what should we do? What can we point to? Where are we at with this? So as a way to just speak that sign value, let's talk about it. So
Right. I also think for some people it creates an awareness. Oh, it's Lent. Oh, it's
yeah,
Friday. Oh, it's a
right.
I, I'm going to offer up the meat. I'm going to think
Yeah,
about, right? It's a way to think about on Fridays where we are in the calendar of the church.
yeah. No, I love that. I mean, it starts with awareness, right?
Right.
Paying attention. Yeah.
Right.
Um, but again, going outside, I do show a video. Hakeem Olajuwon is a devout Muslim basketball player in the
Hmm.
NBA. I think we've entered Ramadan. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now. And he was actually, so they fast from sunrise to sundown.
Hmm.
And during 1995, he was player of the month. And that was in February, because I think Ramadan shifts
It does.
like a little bit like Easter.
Hmm.
And he was player of the month when he was fasting. And so there was an interview, and they said, well, what's that like? You've given up this food, and, how can you fast? And he said, well, first of all, as a devout Muslim, it's not a choice. It's what you do because you're a Muslim. And I thought that's so interesting. Like, it's an extension of who you are. In some ways, you're almost more free because you know how to proceed, what to do. Sometimes choice can be like, oh, do I do it or not? But I appreciate what you've said about awareness,
Hmm.
because it's like, this is who I am and a part of a community that I'm a part of. So lots there.
Yes.
Lots of fish to chew on.
A lot of it. So for moving on to our spiritual stew, the gospel for the week, I'm actually going to go back to last week's gospel when we did not record on Sunday because it was Laetare Sunday. And Laetare means the word rejoice. And I thought, what a great, I guess I've thought of this before. You and I have probably talked about this before on the podcast, but what a great way to enter into this last part of Lent because we are getting into the spirit this part of Lent and the season where we are rejoicing. We are preparing to celebrate really what our faith is all about.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
also when Notre Dame announces the winner, the recipient of this year's Laetare Medal, which I took special interest in because, of course, at Notre Dame's graduation, there are two speakers, the main commencement speaker, who I am always interested in finding out who that is, and in particular this year because my son's graduating. And then
Ah,
also the Laetare Medal winner recipient speaks as well. So I was curious to see who that was. And I am blanking on her name at this point, but she is the CEO of Feed America. So it will be interesting to hear her speak.
yes. And it's a place at the table. It's
Oh, place at the
Claire
table.
Babineau Fontenot. I'm not going to say her last name, Babineau Fontenot, but yes. I too love to find out who will be honored. And so they kind of they announce it on that day. I don't know who the commencement speaker is. Haley, who have they announced the speaker or just
They
the Laetare?
no, no, and you're right. I apologize. You're right. It is a name that I am not. I'm going to learn how to say when she announces
Yeah.
when they announce when they announce, and it is
Yeah.
feeding. It is feeding America. I apologize for getting that mixed up. But the main commencement speaker is Father Jenkins.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
Okay.
In his
That's
fine
thoughtful.
in his final
Yeah.
in his final commencement, his final graduation as president of the university before he
Wow.
retires, they asked him to give the commencement address.
That's wonderful. What
Yeah.
an honor.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
A lot of feedback, as you can imagine. People always have their opinions on graduation
They do.
speakers. Completely aware. I've experienced that of
Yes,
myself.
as a former commencement speaker herself.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So,
One of the best. I know I'm biased,
well,
but
I
yeah.
and I've always said, and it's a great. It was a great experience for many reasons. But what I learned was never judge a speaker when they are announced. Feel free to judge after their
Mhm.
remarks,
Sure.
but yeah. So
Yeah,
that
that's fair. That's
yeah.
fair. Yeah,
So
that's great.
and then in last week's gospel, for some reason, I don't know why, but gospels that have phrases and sayings that we hear often out of context always just jump out at me. And I don't know if it's
Hmm.
I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm kind of listening to the gospel, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I've heard that.
Right.
Okay, pay attention. But of course, in last week's gospel was of John, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And it's interesting that, and certainly that's a phrase that we hear often, but it's interesting when you really think about that. He gave his only son, and yet it's also Laetare Sunday where we are rejoicing.
Hmm.
So that
Yeah.
paradox of God
Hmm.
sacrificing his
Hmm.
son for us, but
Yeah.
yet we're rejoicing about it.
Yeah.
It really it
Yeah.
made me think about what that meant. Obviously,
Hmm.
as a parent, that would be very hard to imagine,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
yet it is something we celebrate and rejoice. So
Yeah.
just kind of chewing on
Yeah.
that, and that
Yeah.
was where my mind
Always.
went when I heard that.
Yeah. Well, we certainly used to see that at sporting events, and Tim Tebow wore it on his eye black, as we know. But yeah, my lens on it has always been it's that God shows up, right? That God so loved the world that he gave his only, and he's with us.
Hmm.
Christianity is the only tradition where God becomes flesh, the incarnation. And to me, that makes all the difference that he would know our suffering, but know our joy, that he would become a child, totally dependent and his parents, and be raised and be celebrated and then rejected, and yeah, come to his death. So yeah, a very full life, but also yeah, one that ends, as we know, with Good Friday.
Hmm.
But then also, right, we have a response. So yeah, that God the Father, that piece, that perspective that you look at, and then the perspective of Jesus. So John 3:16 is a good one to memorize,
Hmm.
right? And
Yes.
carry with us. Yeah. I don't totally see how it should be a sports thing, but
I'm
but
not
that's
sure it
okay.
relates to sports. I think that's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
a
It's
reminder
just
that
uh,
whoever is wearing that, whether it be Tim Tebow or
yeah,
someone else, that they are
committed to
dedicating their
Christ.
life to. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Today's gospel was one that has a very like kind of hard saying. So I was kind of thinking about this sometimes when there are hard sayings, like, a part of me wants to go to like, oh, the translation isn't what it should be. But it's, in all truth, I tell you, unless a wheat grain falls into the earth and dies, it remains only a single grain. But if it dies, it yields a rich harvest. Beautiful. Love the imagery. Next line: anyone who loves his life loses it. Anyone who hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. And that is also John's gospel. And it's like, that is a strong statement. Like, if I love my life, I guess if I'm living at this world, right, I'm not living the way that we're called to be. But those who hate their life will be rewarded. So I always struggle when there's like a very strong message in a gospel, um, but it does catch me. It does make me kind of think, right? So, like you're saying, certain lines that you're familiar with catch your attention. I
Hmm.
think the same thing happens when there's a tough line.
So there's a different way I first read this. And I'll be honest with you, when I heard today's gospel, I thought, okay, that's not going to
Right?
be my reflection during our podcast because
Yeah.
it's a lot. And
Yeah.
but could it possibly be interpreted? Anyone who loves his life loses it. So if we love life here and
Mm.
we are doing all that we are called to do, which
Yeah.
I would like to think that I am more that I feel more loving and I enjoy life more when I am doing the work God asked me to do.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
we're going to lose this because we're going someplace better.
Yeah.
But if you hate your life here and you're very unsettled and you're not doing God's work, then maybe that's where you stay in eternity.
Mm.
I don't
Mm.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's the I don't know. That's
Yeah.
that's a little bit how I when I heard
Yeah.
that.
How you hear that message? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. If we do love our
Yeah.
life here, we're going to lose
Yeah.
it
I
and
know.
maybe loss isn't bad.
You're right. Possibly. I guess I think of it as like part like the selfishness or like the tending to me first. Like
Yes.
that's, making the sacrifice. But yeah, I kind of hate my life when I'm feel like over obligated when I have to serve others. It's like, why am I the hardest working person here now, right? But yeah, Jesus did not come to be served, he came to serve.
True.
And yes, and I think service can be really hard. So,
True, true. And
yeah.
if we gave up all of our, possessions
Yeah.
and did what we were really,
Right.
really supposed
Right.
to do, then
Yeah.
maybe I wouldn't love
Yeah.
it.
No, I
That's
know.
interesting.
No,
That's certainly something to chew on.
it is. Yeah. Ask some others, see what direction they take us.
So my takeaway for this week, I am going to be joyful. I'm going to be rejoicing. I am getting ready to enter 10 days of hosting family. I will
10
be 10
days.
days.
Whoa.
My mother arrives on the 21st. My parents leave on the 31st. And that's a lot. I
That's a
am
long
really
time.
excited. I am really
Yes.
looking forward to spending that time
Good.
with my mom. I'll be
Good.
with my mom for 10 days. I'll be with my dad for, I think, 6. The boys are coming home. Well, I will love all of that. It's a very long time to be with family and to have family in your house.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to enter it and joyful and hopefully come out of it probably rejoicing that they left. But I'm going to really enter it with a joyful heart. I think, all
Right.
of us, our parents are aging. You never
Yeah.
know how much time you're going to have with them. I really am looking forward to this time together, but I am prepared for it being an effort filled 10 days.
Yes. So do you have a specific strategy
Lots
that
of,
you
I,
and
lots of activities.
yeah, of
No, a good balance of activities.
course.
Something
Yeah.
to do every day, but not something that becomes draining or too
Yeah.
much. We also
Yeah.
have to remember, my parents are almost 80. So my mom and we're going up to New York for a few days because that's where
Awesome.
she's from.
Yeah.
But I can't pack the days and walk 12 miles for 3 days in New York City because that's not
No
going to
way.
work. So planning
Yeah.
something to do here and there while also
Okay.
planning for breaks. I think
Mm.
I've got a good plan, but we'll see. And again, I am really looking forward to it. But it's also, it's just Jamie and I. We live by ourselves, and
Yeah. Right. And no,
even just
it's
having anybody in our house
yeah.
it is different and an
Yeah.
adjustment. I think we all feel that way. So, and of course it is Easter and it is, we'll move into Holy Weekend, and that is a very joyful time, a solemn time, a holy time, a time to reflect. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to all of that. But
Yeah.
my goal is to
I think
stay
yeah.
joyful.
That's good. No, that's a definitely yep. Latare. That's your word, I guess,
That is
right?
my word for the week.
Gaudete Latare. Even if you need to
Gaudete.
repeat it to yourself.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So my takeaway, I was reminded this on Friday. So we have a mayor's race in San Francisco. It's actually, I would say it's kind of exciting because it's not determined, and there's a real possibility that a new person will be in the office of the mayor. And with that just comes a little bit of hope. Like people are like, hey, what are the strategies? I mean, it's all politics. So
Hmm.
at the end of the day, who knows? But like there's hope because it's like there really might be a change and we need change. And so I think, ultimately Lent and Easter, well, Easter is a time of hope. But so's Lent, right? We
Hmm.
just I have to look for signs of hope. And so I'm just kind of enjoying the buzz. I'm enjoying the energy. I'll be at an event with one of the candidates on Tuesday night, and I'm just kind of really curious on what kind of he sees as inroads towards making the city better and our community better. We certainly need it. Um, and we have a bigger election going on this year, but there's really
But we are Faith Fondue and we are Switzerland and
yeah,
we are neutral.
totally. I know. Amen. And the at Mass today they were talking about a 6-week prayer program, and it said like a message of peace and hope in a world that like they were calling to mind there's just a lack of real peace in our world.
Hmm.
And
There
you
is.
don't have to I mean I can look in my city, but obviously with just some world events, it's hard. It's really there is some real strife. So and loss of life in war torn areas. So we need, the hope but we need the peace that Christ can bring, and hopefully our leaders can bring. I don't know. It's a lot.
Well, it is a lot, but I do think those are two very strong emotions to enter into these next 2 weeks as we move towards Easter Sunday. And that is hope and joy. And to really remember what this season is. Certainly I'm looking forward to seeing my parents. I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
seeing my children. That it is a family time, but it's so much more than that as well. And so I need to let the emotions and the up and the wide range of emotions that may come. I need to stay grounded in the reason for Easter and which is sacrifice and hope, and those really
Yeah.
are very strong emotions that can carry us through anything.
Yeah. No, Holy Week is such a, I guess our next episode is like right now, it's supposed to be Easter Sunday, so we'll have to figure that out. But yeah, Holy Week in and of itself is really a long, I mean, you talked about having a long week this week, in a short amount of time.
Right.
Holy Week is hard. It's a tough one. It's a long week, and spiritually, because
Yes.
of what you have to go through. Good Friday is a hard day. Holy Thursday for a lot of people is too. So we have to go through that. But yes, then when we get to Easter Sunday, we get to celebrate. So yeah,
But I actually appreciate that it's not, you look at Christmas and
totally.
we have
Yeah,
Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, really only 24 hours, if maybe 36 hours that we're celebrating this holiday. Of course, we do have Lent and Advent, or we do have Advent and the four
right.
Sundays, but we also have Lent, which is longer than Advent, and Holy Week is longer than Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, as it should be. It is the
Yeah,
cornerstone of our faith. And it's
yeah.
not always viewed that way. I think many people see Christmas as a quote unquote bigger celebration,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
Easter really is the cornerstone of our church. So
Yeah.
it should be that. And we should take the time to recognize that and to give it the prayerfulness and the time that it deserves.
Amen. So Alleluia. I'll save the Alleluia till
No alleluias during Lent.
episode. Okay. Yes. So
Well,
I redact that.
and I wish you a blessed Holy Week, a happy
Likewise.
Easter. We will certainly be in touch and
Yes.
let our listeners know when our next episode will be posted.
Got it.
Have a great one.
Happy Lent.